All right. How's it going, Brad?
Doing very well, man. Great to be with you.
Awesome. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah,
All
I've
right.
been excited about this. We'll crank it up and talk about my favorite thing, which is real estate.
Cool. Well, let's get into it. Let's get started with how you got started. What got you interested in this business and how you made your start?
Yeah, I don't know. It was kind of like a weird thing. So I was 17 years old and I decided to get my real estate license. So I literally woke up one day and said, gosh, I like this thing called real estate. I didn't go to bed thinking about real estate, and maybe subliminally I'd watch some Carlton Sheets at some point in late night television, but decided to get into real estate. So when I was 18, I got my real estate license. I was a dismal failure my first 6 months in sales. But luckily I got picked up by a builder developer who taught me new construction and development. So when I was going through college in my undergrad, I sold new construction up until the crash happened. And at that point, I mean, it was just a terrible time. I mean, we went from having a model home where people came through, maybe 10 couples per weekend. We literally went 4 months and nobody showed up. I mean, it was a ghost town. And so it was at that point I decided, well, maybe since I have this undergrad in tax, I should go into tax. And I did that for about 30 days. And I realized pretty quickly that lifestyle wasn't for me. It didn't match my personality type, and it just wasn't long-term what I really wanted. And so that was some good direction. So I went back into selling real estate during the worst real estate calamity, I would say, in the past 100 years. And so that was fun. But basically at the beginning of 2010, for a few reasons, I decided to retire my real estate license.
Hmm.
And from there, I started to market and do the investing side. So it took me about 8 months to hit my first deal. And I don't think it should take anybody that long. But I had a lot of mental hangups on the business, and, a lot of doubt and fear. I mean, the things that everybody deals with, I think, whenever they start up. So it took me longer than it should have. But from there, I started
So
growing the
what were
business
some
and
of
going
those
from there.
hangups? What were some of those specific things that you were struggling with during those 8 months?
Yeah. So I felt like being a licensee should have given me kind of a head start on getting into this business. And I don't really think it did, because I had to unlearn a lot of the traditional real estate stuff because I had no money to invest. My credit was extended in the one house that my wife and I owned as an owner occupant. So I couldn't go to a bank and get financing, and I had no cash to invest. So being a traditional real estate guy as a real estate agent, I had to learn, like, hey, subject to will work, and people will owner finance you, and you can get 0% owner financing. So I had to unlearn a lot of things. So that was number one. But secondly, I think that there's a lot of fear around getting started in real estate, and especially on the marketing side, because a lot of people view marketing as an expense. And I'm a big believer that marketing is the first investment. And I cannot even today have a higher rate of return on my cash than putting it into marketing.
Hmm.
So I had a lot of fear around the marketing machine and investing in the marketing. So that's a couple of things that really slowed me down.
Yeah, and that's a pretty common thing where you put out a little bit of that marketing money, and then you don't get very many leads, or you don't get any deals from those leads, and you start wondering, man, I mean, I didn't get anything from that. Do I
Right,
put more into it?
right,
And
right.
that's a hard thing to overcome, right?
It really is. And it's not until you have proven that marketing system that it becomes much easier. And
Hmm.
that can take, months or years at times.
Yeah. And so what was your marketing system in the beginning? What was really working for you?
Yeah. So I was like the bandit sign king of Middle Tennessee at that point. So, I started off with a box of 100 signs, and I was just terrified to put them out because, you hear about different things of, well, they're illegal and maybe the police are going to stop me and all that. And I got over that pretty quickly. But I started off with 100 signs. I put 25 out, and I remember, oh my gosh, like, people actually call off these things.
Yeah.
It was amazing. So I did a lot of signs up until the point that they became really ineffective, I would say, in my market, maybe around 2013, 2014.
Hmm. And so what'd you move on to from there?
So then I moved to direct mail. And at that point, I had a pretty stabilized business. We were doing transactions monthly. And I started off with maybe, I don't know, 5,000 mailers a month.
Wow. What kind of list were you mailing to?
At that point, it was a high equity list by zip code. So it was, we had a spreadsheet, and we took by zip code the areas that had a median price range that we wanted to play in, that had a lot of cash sales. So we knew that there was investor activity in those areas. And, one of the great things about being in Nashville the past 10 years is we've had just a lot of growth in every way. So a lot of places that were traditionally pretty dangerous areas have really transitioned to really upper class neighborhoods. And with that, there was a lot of opportunity. But I was going over a high equity list, or going after a high equity list based on zip code.
Cool. So so do you guys focus, like that's mostly what you still do now, is just direct mail?
No, it got to where at one point I was doing 15,000 mailers a month, and they were all yellow letters. So I wasn't a big believer in postcards. I could just tell a difference in the phone based on postcards versus yellow letters. And it got to where mail got really saturated. And I think we've seen this all over the country because, more and more investors are doing direct mail. And so it got to where I was mailing 70,000 letters per month to get the same deal flow that I was getting from 15. And so with that, I had to take on staff. I had 2.5 people full-time on the phone just to handle the lead flow from 70,000 letters. And so it's just like, it got too inefficient for me. And mail still works. Like, I'm a big believer that anything works. Like, we can drop pamphlets from the sky and buy houses if you do enough of them. But maybe some forms of marketing might be a lot more efficient than others. So at that point, I switched to all internet marketing. And so that's what I've been doing ever since.
Yeah. So what are your different ways of getting the leads from online?
So we're just AdWords. We're just doing AdWords on Google, and we're doing that across 126 markets. And we do it that way because I can go wide and bid less per keyword. And at this point, I don't care where the house is, because if we have an equity position, then that's all I'm really concerned about. So we can have local professionals tell me what the house looks like as far as an inspection report, and as far as comparable sales, get a couple broker price opinions. So we can get the info that we need to make good decisions without having to go and look at the house. And it's a lot of fun to buy houses in states I've never been in. Yeah. But we're only doing AdWords now, and it's the most efficient form of marketing that I've found, because and I don't know the numbers now, but there was a point when if we had 12 leads, we bought one house. And that was just, we could handle 12 calls really efficiently without, breaking our backs with 100 phone calls from yellow letters.
Yeah, and that's because they're looking for you, right? When they're searching Google, they're looking for help out of a situation instead of just being shown marketing that they might respond to, right?
Oh, absolutely. It makes a huge difference in a pull versus a push technique as far as marketing. And it even impacts the negotiation. So I'm a big believer that it's tough to negotiate great deals with yellow letters, because you're pushing them to call you versus being in a place where they're looking for you and they already have acknowledged that they have a problem. There's a lot of problems with direct mail, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are you guys typically paying per deal to get them using Google Ads?
Yeah, so it's going to depend. I still run local ads in the Nashville and Chattanooga and Knoxville markets at times, Knoxville. And I'm running ads locally in Little Rock. So we're more focused on those areas, and we'll pay more there because we have more of an infrastructure in those markets. Okay. But whenever we get a lead from Alaska, we have to be a little bit more conservative in our transactions, right? Because it's like, I know nothing about the Alaska market. So I would say that it's probably around $2,000 in marketing, or $2,000 to $2,500 on the local level. And then we may be a little bit more on the national stuff, but it's just because we want to be that more conservative.
Yeah. And you guys are just, you're wholesaling them?
No, I'm not a big wholesaler. My preeminent strategy is to buy creatively and then sell with owner financing. So we create a lot of wrap notes.
And you're doing that all over the country?
Correct.
Yeah. So how are you doing that with, in markets that you're not in? Like, how are you doing those in those other markets?
Well, on the purchase side, I kind of alluded to some of it. I mean, we're going to get local professionals to verify value and condition. And then we're going to do our marketing to attempt to put our buyer in place before we close. So that way we get out of origination. So we can do that.
What do you mean by local professionals, like agents?
Yeah. So we'll get, say, 2 broker price opinions. So a broker price opinion is it's like a glorified CMA. So a CMA is comparable market analysis. So you can have an agent pull a CMA just without going and looking at the house, but we want pictures of the house. We want up and down the street. We want to look at the neighbors, and we can do some of that on Google Maps, but some of that is fairly old data,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if we have interior pictures and then we have comparable sales, we will pay about $150 for a BPO. And if the BPO is, there's a little bit of an anomaly between those two numbers, then we may take it another notch and get a full blown appraisal. Okay. But we're also going to get a home inspection. And the home inspection is for two reasons. Number one, we want to know exactly condition, especially on houses we've never been to in states we've never been to. But we want to have that as an additional negotiation tool, because undoubtedly there's going to be something that the seller failed to tell us about the condition, whether they knew about it or not. It's very possible that they didn't know. Okay. And it just allows us to get a better price. And I think that that's a fair way to do it if we don't know what we didn't know whenever we agreed to a price and the seller didn't either.
Right. So whenever you have all of these leads coming in from all over the place, and then you've got these different people in the different markets that will go and do these price opinions for you, and you're paying for those. So that means the cost of lead has gone up now by that additional amount, because I'm sure do you have criteria to weed out some of those leads so it's not every call that you're getting BPOs on?
Yeah, I mean, we have to have it under contract to get the BPO.
Oh, okay.
So we have to have some idea that there's an equity position whenever we put it under contract. So we're not the people, and I really don't like this model. I mean, a lot of people basically put everything under contract with the hopes of negotiating down later on. And I'm not that guy. So we have to have an idea that there's an equity position day one. And with that equity position, we'll put it under contract. And then if we find out something that we didn't know, then we can renegotiate. But we'll put the property under contract before we're getting these BPOs and home inspections and that kind of thing.
Okay. And then, so when you're making those offers, like it doesn't sound like you're doing rehabbing, right? So you guys are putting them under contract, doing your research, and then owner financing them out as is?
Yeah. So I do some basic carpet paint lipstick rehabs on the local level. But our preeminent model is to buy an owner finance. And when we do owner finance, we're not touching the house, to the point that I had one house, and you'll get a kick out of this. There was a roof leak that was so bad that in our marketing material to put the buyer in place, we told them that if it's raining that day, they need to take their umbrella inside the house.
Yeah.
We sold that house with owner financing.
Yeah. And okay, so then, are you keeping things in a certain price range? Because I know with owner financing, once you get up to a certain point, like the amount of cost for the house, I mean, do you guys stick with a certain sweet spot no matter what market it is?
Well, I think it happens that way just by default. So I think in general, I think truths are found in extremes, and someone that's in a $5 million plus house has less life problems to where they have the issue of needing to sell the equity position for the finality of the sale, right? So they're not really our target market as far as sellers go. So in general, we're somewhere around median, average, or below for that area. But we have a house right now where in Middle Tennessee, I'd say roughly the median price is somewhere around $275, and we're owner financing a house for $700. So, and that can be done, and we'll get a really strong down payment on that, and it'll be a great deal.
Cool. And how many of these deals you guys doing a year?
I don't know. I really don't look at it that way. I'm really more concerned about gross profit and note equity. Okay. So I'm looking at gross profit when it comes to the retail side of things. And I'm looking at note equity whenever we're creating our owner finance notes, because I have friends that do 200 or 250 transactions, and their net is probably less than what a real estate agent would get because they're just hell bent on hitting that number. Well, yeah. I don't care if we do one deal a year and we hit our gross profit and note equity deal, our goals for that. I'm happy with that. I'm not looking for quantity. I'm looking for, let's get the equity.
Yeah. And so do you find sometimes where you guys have put one under contract and, because you're not actually closing before you're looking for that buyer, right? You're already, once you have it under contract, you're trying to find an owner finance buyer.
Ideally, yes.
Yeah. And I mean, have you had any that you got kind of stuck with because you closed on it and couldn't find somebody to buy it?
I mean, stuck with, I don't know if I would put it that far. There have certainly been houses that have taken longer than I thought, but the owner finance market is a huge market. And whenever you look at the supply demand curve for owner finance houses, I mean, it's a lot different than the retail market. So if you take a house, if you take a market that has 3,000 houses on the market,
Mm-hmm.
you'd be tough pressed to find 30 houses in that market that are offered with owner financing. So, I mean, it's a big, big difference in supply demand. We've had a couple, I would say in my entire career, where it's like, it just took too long, but there are various reasons for that.
Yeah. And so are you guys having agents, in those different markets take care of that process of selling with the owner financing?
No, when we sell with owner financing, there's no real estate agents involved.
All right. So you guys are finding, you guys are doing marketing yourself, maybe online or something for potential buyers and sending them by and then having them do an application with you?
Correct.
Right. All right. Is there anything to watch out for with Dodd-Frank or anything with doing all this owner financing in different places?
Yeah, and that's the reason that we really attempt to put our buyer in place first, is we're not the one originating the loan.
All right. And yeah, I mean, can you explain that a little bit for people though? I mean, just a little bit more detail, what the ins and outs of that transaction are.
Yeah, so I guess let's kind of just put a deal together. And this is one that we bought, I guess, 4 or 5 days ago. So it's 240,000 underlying at 3.99%. So that's what our seller owed. Now they're about 2 or so payments behind. So they're getting 10,000 cash at close. So I'm in it at $250,000. Okay. So that's my buy, is 250. We're owner financing the property for 330,000 with 20,000 down. Okay. So I'll have 310,000 owed to me with an underlying of 240. So I'll have 70,000 in note equity, and then I'll have a net down payment of $10,000, which is not unlike a wholesale fee for a lot of people. But the difference in the wholesale fee is I get the wholesale fee and I get $70,000 in the future and cash flow on the note each month.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the difference in why I like the owner finance game versus the wholesaling game. And I've done some wholesales, but it's just really not for me. But does that kind of illustrate what you were hoping?
Yeah, I think so. Now, but what are the things with the so you're not wrapping that original? I mean, what are you guys doing with that? So you're getting your own loan to pay off the seller's loan?
No. So we're buying the 240 subject to. Okay. So the
Okay,
$240,000 loan remains in place after closing. We're giving $10,000 to our seller. That's their walkaway money. And then we're selling the house for $330,000 with $20,000 down.
All right. So do you guys have any issues with or concerns about due on sale clauses or anything like that with the underlying loans?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So I've done a lot of these. I've had a lot of friends do a lot of these. We've never had the situation where a loan has gotten called due. Okay. But you do have to plan for that because lightning does strike. And so you have to plan for worst case scenario. So in this kind of a scenario, we would have a buyer that's put $20,000 down. So there's a $310,000 note. And if I had to fire sell that note to pay off that $240,000, then that's okay. I mean, I'll lose my equity position in the note, but let's say that happens once out of every 250 transactions. It's like, okay, fine. It's a calculated risk. It's in my opinion, a very slight risk, but anything can happen.
Yeah. Is there anything regarding different states in their foreclosure process that people would want to watch out for?
Yeah. So if you are in a mortgage state, which is a judicial foreclosure state, which means that it can take, at some points up to a year to foreclose on a property, then you have to make sure that if you're creating wrap notes and your buyer defaults, that you have cash reserves to service that underlying payment if that's what you've guaranteed to your seller. So I like to play in deeds of trust states because they're short foreclosure states, but I will do transactions in mortgage states. We just have to make it more of a calculated risk. So the deal is going to have to be a little bit better in a mortgage state for me to do it than in a deed of trust state.
Yeah. And so have you all had any issues with, foreclosures and transactions?
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you do enough wraps, you're going to foreclose on some. I would say our default rate is less than what people would expect. It's somewhere around 10%. But the fact is that we're getting real down payments from buyers. So our average down payment is somewhere around $25,000, and that would be a range of maybe 7,500 on the low end to 70,000 on the high end. So I've
Hmm.
gotten a $70,000 down payment on a $170,000 house. Well, purely financially speaking, if someone is paying $70,000 down on a $170,000 house, it is to my financial benefit
Yeah.
that they default. Now, I don't want anybody to default, certainly not a family or whatever, and I don't enjoy foreclosing. But I mean, it's just part of the game. It's like if you have rentals, you're going to have to evict. If you have notes, you're going to have to foreclose. It's just part of maintaining cash flow.
And do y'all have any criteria for their credit scores or bankruptcies in the past so many years or anything like that?
Not really. What we're looking for is we want an income that substantiates the payment. So if someone has $1,500 in disability income and that's all they have, I don't think that I'm setting them up for success to sell them a house as a PI payment of 800, right? And so, but the real thing is I want to see a down payment. So, if someone has around 20% down, then I feel pretty comfortable with the transaction, and that if they're kind of cash down, that they're going to fight to keep it, if times get hard for them. And I think it's been proven pretty successful.
Nice. All right. So anything else that you want to share regarding that model with anybody out there if they want to get into that? Where can they find out more about learning that sort of strategy?
Well, I would say that it's kind of a more niche strategy. My mentor is David Alexander, who he doesn't really have content out there, but there are people I'm sure in your local market that can help you do these things that understand the owner finance game and the note game.
All right. And what are your plans for the future?
I don't really have a great answer for that. I've looked at bigger assets and it's like, well, at some point, all these notes are going to cash out and we'll trade up into multifamily or we'll trade up into uh, mobile home parks or strips or something, and I haven't found anything that certainly can touch the yield that we're getting cash on cash. But I really don't know. I mean, until something strikes my fancy, I'm going to continue buying and selling. I mean, we get great deals, and there's still great deals out there, and just keep creating our notes.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. If it's working, why change it, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's just fun now. I mean, and it's fun to see it kind of build up. It's amazing to me how many deals I've missed out on those first 8 months, because the learning curve in real estate's vast. If I could impart anything to anyone, it's that if you decide and make a hard, fast commitment in this business, you can do this business. Anybody can do this business, but it takes a commitment.
Yeah. Yeah. So who does the PPC? Are you doing that yourself? Do you have an in-house team or somebody local company that you're using?
I have a couple of people. One is in Los Angeles, and the other guy's in Vancouver, Canada. Um, it 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 seems to be that there's some changes going on in the AdWords game right now. We're seeing cost per click go up. We're seeing cost per lead go up. I think part of that is at least in some of the markets that we're in, Open Door is coming in really heavy with their marketing, and I know Zillow is too. So those are the in the room that we have to contend with. But I have a couple guys that know far, far more about this stuff. I'm not there to learn Google AdWords and Facebook ads and all that kind of stuff. We're there to buy equity.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, very cool. Do you want to have any interesting stories about any kind of crazy deals or anything that you've done that always, you share with other investors or anything whenever sharing, horror stories or just awesome deals that you are super pumped about?
Yeah, so I'll start with a kind of a bad deal to begin with. And it wasn't a bad deal in terms of us losing money because we didn't buy the house, but we had a really nice lady call us. And she said, hey, we want you to come out and take a look at the house. And, we went through the numbers. She was 2 months behind. And so we get there and she said, well, this was my daughter's house and she passed away. Okay, I'm like, okay. And I'm not like a hocus pocus kind of guy. Like my background's accounting, I'm pretty grounded, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I go into the house and my acquisition guy, he had just started with me. So this was almost 4 years ago, I guess. And he went into the house with me, and we're walking around, and I just got this really uneasy feeling, like just sick to my stomach, kind of nauseous, didn't feel good,
Mhm.
sort of thing. And I go to the bedroom, and the carpet's pulled up. There's no carpet in that room. And at this point, it's just like, I've got to get out of this house. And so we left, and we get back to the car, and Tony says to me, he says, Brad, did you feel that in that house?
Mm.
I'm like, yeah, I did, man. Like, I don't know what that was. And so when I got back to the office, I Googled the names on tax record, and it ended up, there was a murder suicide that happened in that bedroom. And the husband had killed the wife and then killed himself. And
Wow.
it's just like, and I felt so bad for the lady, because it was her daughter that got murdered.
Yeah.
And, I tried to buy the house, but because it was husband and wife on title, and because he killed her first, and it was like joint tenant, then at that point he owned the house, and then he killed himself, and he had children. So, which we could have won in court, but we couldn't do that quickly enough to beat the foreclosure.
Mm.
So they ended up losing that house, and that was a terrible transaction. To talk about a good transaction, and this one still has a little bit of a fun streak to it. I had a lady call me, and her husband and her 2 children had died within 90 days. And she was an older lady. She was in her 70s. And this was at the depths of the recession. And so she called, and she had 2 houses that she wanted 20 grand. So I was like, okay, so you want 40. She said, no, 20's for both of them. There's 2 houses on 1 deed. And so I go to look at the house, and I pull up to the house, and I notice that there's this really nice undercover vehicle. So there's a detective or something. And I thought, man, they're here to bust me over my bandit signs. It's just like worst case scenario is what comes to mind. And I was like, well, I'm going to go up there and talk to them anyway. So I go up to the front door, and out walks this cowboy hat wearing big tall guy in a police uniform. And he said, son, I'm Sheriff George. I'm the sheriff of this county. I said, well, hello, Sheriff George. And he was a really great guy. He was kind of like that Andy Griffith type. Like, I really enjoyed this guy. And ended up, he knew my uncle, because my uncle is fire chief in a different county. We ended up buying both of those houses. And this lady was just so thankful, because these houses were such an emotional drain on her, because that's where she had her children, raised them and everything. And they were vacant. They needed a lot of work. There was squatters in there, homeless people. I mean, it was a mess. But the kind of crazy thing about this is that she had a for sale by owner sign in the front yard for like 2 years. Okay. So I bought them, I closed on them, and then I'm selling them with owner financing, and I put them up on Craigslist. And so the neighbor behind her calls me and offers me cash 5 times what I paid for them.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, and that's the power of marketing. It's like, had he known about this, he would have gotten my deal, but I ended up sending the lady a little bit more money.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. That's crazy how that works, right?
Man, you do enough transactions, anything can happen. We've gotten run out of houses before. I went to the wrong house one time, and a guy pulled a gun on me. I mean, it's a lot of fun, man. I wouldn't trade it for anything. A desk job, I don't know what I would do with that.
Yeah. All right. So is there anything you want to, any books or anything you're reading that you would recommend for the audience?
When it comes to business, I'm a big 10X fan, that and Be Obsessed or Be Average. I like both of them on audiobooks, because Grant Cardone delivers like no other. I also like Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, and that's for anybody, business or non-business. I think that there's just a lot of great insight there. So I would recommend all of that.
Awesome. All right. Anything else you want to share?
Man, just happy to be here. Hope I delivered some value. I love this business. I love this industry. I think it's a great industry that's ever improving, and I'm really excited to see what the next market brings.
Awesome. Now, if anybody out there wants to, find you and reach out to you, how should they be able to do that?
Yeah, you can find me on bradsmotherman.com. I've also got a podcast investor creator on iTunes, as well as other places. And for those inclined, I'm happy to have you as a friend on Facebook. So add me as a friend there, and we can chat about my favorite thing to talk about, which is real estate investing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brad.
All right, man. Enjoyed it.
All right. Keep in touch. Yeah, me too. All right. Take care.
All right, buddy. Thanks.